Could goats, bamboo, drones, and satellites stop a wildfire before it grows out of control? For this video's producer, that question is personal. His family was recently evacuated from Bédar in southern Spain as a wildfire approached. Together, they could form a system that reduces fuel, detects an ignition within minutes, and attacks it while it is still small. So what would this system look like, and which parts have actually been demonstrated? Fire is a natural and sometimes beneficial part of many ecosystems. Therefore, our objective is not to eliminate every fire. Instead, we want to prevent a high-risk ignition from becoming a destructive wildfire. This gives us two problems. Problem number one is fuel. Dry vegetation allows fire to spread and climb. Problem number two is time. A small ignition is easier to suppress than a large moving fire. In other words, we need to modify selected fuels and compress the time between ignition and response. The $11 million X-Prize wildfire gives us a useful benchmark. Its space-based track asks teams to detect fires within 1 minute, then deliver precise reports within 10. Its autonomous response track asks teams to detect and suppress a high-risk fire inside a 1,000 square kilometer test area within 10 minutes while leaving decoy fires untouched. These are test targets, not proof that wildfire has been solved, but they turn respond faster into something engineers can measure. Targeted grazing uses animals to remove specific vegetation in specific places. Goats are useful because they eat shrubs, leaves, and invasive plants that other grazing animals may avoid. In 2021, the Sandia Pueblo Environment Department tested more than 100 goats across 100 acres in New Mexico. Portable fencing concentrated them inside treatment areas and protected selected native plants. The goats reduced invasive biomass and fuel close to the ground, but taller vegetation remained, and the project needed fencing, transport, water, animal care, and monitoring. So this is not a plan to release goats into a forest. It is a managed technique for maintaining selected fuel breaks and defensible areas. A Spanish grower says he spent 15 years developing a giant, non-invasive bamboo in Montesa, Valencia. He proposes using its dense stand and fallen leaves to prevent weeds from growing underneath. This matters because dry weeds are fine fuel. If bamboo replaced a continuous layer of dry weeds with a moister, managed fuel bed, it might slow a surface fire. This is called a green firebreak, a strip of lower flammability vegetation interrupting a more flammable landscape. Researchers in China have documented green barriers that reduce fire spread under the right conditions. However, this does not prove the Spanish bamboo works. Bamboo stems and leaves burn. The leaves suppressing weeds can themselves become dry fuel. Performance would depend on the species, moisture, litter, stand width, weather, and maintenance. The variety has not been publicly identified, and we found no independent controlled burn result. Therefore, bamboo belongs in an experiment, not yet in a national wildfire plan. Satellites can scan large and remote landscapes for unusual heat. In theory, an automated system could identify a possible ignition, estimate its location and intensity, and send an alert without waiting for someone to see smoke. A satellite must cover the right place at the right time. Sensors must distinguish a dangerous fire from hot roofs, industrial sites, and other false alarms. Clouds, processing, and communications can add delay. In April 2026, 8 X-Prize teams completed space-based finals testing with the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. At the official recap, results were still being judged. The question is not whether a satellite sees heat. It is whether the system produces a reliable alert in time. A satellite alert is only useful if something happens next. An autonomous aircraft could launch toward the coordinates, inspect the site at closer range, confirm that the target is a dangerous fire, and apply suppressant while the burning area is still small. Doing this in 10 minutes requires automated launch, navigation, fire recognition, safe flight, sufficient payload, accurate suppression, and confirmation. In June 2026, X-Prize finalists tested systems in rural Alaska, using artificial intelligence, autonomous aircraft, sensors, robotics, and different suppression methods. Again, this was a test, not proof that autonomous aircraft can suppress every fire, particularly in wind, smoke, or weak communications. Goats would maintain selected fuel corridors near communities, roads, utilities, and likely ignition zones. A proven green firebreak might interrupt flammable vegetation where grazing is unsuitable. Satellites would provide wide area detection. Local sensors and drones would verify alerts and respond. Human fire managers would define safety limits and take control when automation fails. Each layer compensates for a weakness in another layer. Fuel treatments cannot prevent every ignition. Satellites cannot suppress anything. Drones cannot patrol an entire continent at close range. The value comes from the handoff between them. However, this plan has 5 problems. A treatment that works in grassland might fail in forest or steep terrain. Poorly managed grazing or an introduced plant could damage native species, soil, or water. Fuel returns, bamboo drops leaves, sensors fail. Aircraft need charging, suppressant, inspection, and secure communications. Wind can carry embers over a fuel break and ground a small aircraft. And a 10-minute response requires enough equipment in enough places. A system that succeeds at one test site may be unaffordable across a region. Therefore, we need to determine where the complete system reduces expected wildfire damage at reasonable cost. First, researchers could select one high-risk region and map fuels, ignition history, response times, communities, and infrastructure. They could test grazing and green fire breaks side by side. For bamboo, this means identifying the variety and measuring moisture, dead material, ignition time, flame length, spread rate, and embers. The trial should compare bamboo with existing vegetation, grazed land, and a proven low flammability planting. It should run for several years because young plants and older litter-filled stands differ. At the same site, engineers could connect satellite alerts to one autonomous response base, adding decoy heat sources, communication failures, wind limits, and independent observers. Results should show cost per protected hectare, detection time, false positive rate, suppression success, ecological impact, and downtime. This would turn 4 interesting ideas into one measurable climate resilience program. Before ignition, we need to manage selected fuels. After ignition, we need to detect and suppress dangerous fires while they are small. Goats, green fire breaks, satellites, and autonomous aircraft might each help. None is a complete solution. The next step is to build one transparent regional test, publish the results, and see which parts survive contact with fire.